Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you, as always, for stopping by. Let me start with this photograph from Mfalme Diani Beach, Kenya. It really is exquisite. I miss it. I wish I was there. We tend to hire this wonderful house with these great staff. They come and sell you fresh crab in the morning off the beach, and the sea is turquoise blue, and it's just such fun. I could hear my heart beating. I could hear everyone's heart. I could hear the human noise we sat there making. Not one of us moving, not even when the room went dark. Raymond Carver. I like this, the dynamism of Richard Prince's 1989 photograph, Cowboy, whisks viewers across plains of stereotypical pageantry. Another Raymond Carver poem here, Ultramarine. There isn't enough of anything as long as we live, but at intervals of sweetness appears, and given a chance prevails. And finally, I like this photograph of Manhattan from above by its travel vibes. Political reflections, no filter, the sky today as brown smoke rolled in from the Anaheim Hills fire. Maria Rajoy, the Spanish Prime Minister, tweeted, and my Spanish is totally useless, Comité de Dirección cree y defiende la unidad, el CENI, la concordia y el respeto a la ley. It's an interesting point we've reached there, and it seems the world is intent on splintering into little pieces, and Catalonia, Kurdistan are but the latest examples, and I can't help feeling it's the Oded Yinon plan on steroids, and that it is a nefarious fellow in the Kremlin who's plotting all this with the help of Julian Assange. Bob Corker's alarm is shared by many in the Republican Party, writes James Fallows, but will they act on it? That's the question. The Atlantic asks it's what Bob Corker does next that counts. Namely, Trump is irrational, ill-informed, impulsive, unfit for command, and increasingly a danger to the country and the world. The man who has ultimate authority over the world's most powerful military, including its nuclear weaponry, is recklessly issuing threats to North Korea and others that set the nation on the path to World War III, according to Corker, who, for the record, is chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I know for a fact that every single day at the White House it's a situation of trying to contain him, he told Jonathan Martin of the Times. The New Yorker says the existence of thermonuclear weapons makes Donald Trump's irrational outbursts unacceptable, even indecent. Now, there's been a lot of movement on this whole idea of the Russians interfering via digital media with the US election, and I take you back to something which I wrote in December 2016. I said, we have a deviate tomahawk, we copy, there's a voice. We have gross oscillation here, there's some interference. I've gone redundant, but I'm not sure it's helping. We are clearing an outframe to locate source. Thank you, Colorado. It is probably just selective noise, your negative red on the step function quad. It was a voice, I told them. We have just received an affirm on selective noise, seems to be the point we're at now. We will correct Tomahawk, in the meantime advise you to stay redundant. The voice, in contrast to Colorado's metallic pigeon, is a melange of repartee, laughter and song, with a quality of purest, sweetest sadness. Somehow we were picking up signals from radio programs of 40, 50, 60 years ago. The European Union says disinformation goes hand in hand with election advertising. Data now emerging from the ongoing American investigation into possible Russian interference in and around the presidential election confirms that there was a Russian attempt to use Facebook advertising in order to influence the election result. Some information about this opinion-forming operation has already been made available in articles published by the Washington Post and CNN, among other media. The ads targeted swing states. Fresh information published by CNN now provides additional details, underlining that the Russian advertising had a geographical focus in Michigan and Wisconsin, rather than targeting the United States more broadly. In both these states, the contest between the two presidential candidates ended up being very close, resulting in a less than 1% victory for Donald Trump. These ads focused on race, LGBT, religion, guns. Advertising is not news reporting, so calling the Facebook campaign in question fake news would not be accurate. However, the message was promoting anti-Islam messages in addition to touching on topics from LGBT matters to race issues to immigration to gun rights. As we have seen before, hate speech towards certain groups of people is a well-established part of the toolkit in the pro-Kremlin influence methodology. Together with the language of disinformation, these forms of aggressive discourse are central to the way pro-Kremlin campaign uses information and media, including social media, when targeting public opinion both inside and outside Russia. Look, in my view, and this is what I said in December, it's a prima facie case. And returning to that article, I said, I have no doubt that Putin ran a seriously 21st century, predominantly digital program of interference which amplified the Trump candidacy. Trump was an ideal candidate for this kind of support. He is a linguistic warfare specialist. Look at the names he gave his opponents: Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Joe. They were devastating and terminal. And I said the first thing when you're launching such an influence campaign is plausible deniability. The second thing is non-linearity. You have to learn how to navigate a linear system in a non-linear way. So when you launch a social media campaign where 100 bots repeat the same thing verbatim, like Mombasa did when I was writing this article, then the very linearity is a giant look at me sign. And then I was quoting Beppe Grillo of the Five-Star Movement, who said it is the deflagration of an epoch, it is the apocalypse of the information system, of the TVs, of the big newspapers, of the intellectuals, of journalists. And so traditional media has been disrupted and the insurgents can broadcast live and over the top. From feeding the hothouse conspiracy frenzy online, a constant state of destabilized perception. Timely and judicious doses of WikiLeaks, which drained Hillary's bona fides and her turnout and motivated Trump's. What we have witnessed is something remarkable and noteworthy. Putin himself has proven to be an information master, and his adversaries are his information victims, I said. And somebody I follow called Conspirator Zero. Seriously, Facebook, Twitter, Google, the assertion that you didn't know of these campaigns long ago is impossible to believe. It really is. I like this from Limericking. There is an old fellow named Pence whose hobby is taking offense. He does it some days in gimmicky ways as well as at public expense. And then this from Jill Filipovich. Hillary Clinton is apparently responsible for Harvey Weinstein, her husband, and Donald Trump. Are men ever responsible for what they do? Evening Standard cartoon on the Tory backstabbing. Take a look at that. Pepe Escobar's written, "The House of Saud bows to the House of Putin. What a difference a year makes. An eternity in geopolitics." No one could see this coming. The ideological matrix of all strands of Salafi jihadi terror, which Russia fights no holds barred, from ISIS to Daesh to the Caucasus Emirate, beating a path to the Kremlin and about to embrace Russia as a strategic ally. The House of Saud was horrified by Russia's successful campaign to prevent regime change in Syria. Moscow was solidifying its alliance with Tehran. Hawks in the Obama administration were imposing on Saudi Arabia a strategy of keeping oil prices down to hurt the Russian economy. Now losing all its battles from Syria to Yemen, losing regional influence to both Iran and Turkey, indebted, vulnerable and paranoid, the House of Saud has also to confront the ghost of a possible coup in Riyadh against Crown Prince MBS. Under so much pressure, who are you going to call? And it's a very interesting essay. It goes back to that piece I wrote about Putin being a geopolitical grandmaster, and this is the latest evidence of it. Let's move on. International markets. The DAX is at an all-time high. Currency markets, let's take a look at that. Euro dollar, 117.67. It had fallen to 1.669 on Friday, which was the lowest since August 17. I think we're headed back down there. Dollar index, when I checked last, 93.53. It touched a 10-week high of 94.267 on Friday, when stronger September wage data enhanced already high expectations that the Fed would hike rates for a third time in 2017, which I think is a shoe-in. Japanese yen, 112.60, got way above 113 and then came back as people got worried that the Kim was about to blast something, but he hasn't blasted it so far, and we're at 112.60. Swiss franc, 0.9783. The pound, staging a bit of a recovery, 131.65. The Australian dollar recovered a bit today, 0.7776 last. India rupee, 65.265. South Korean won, 11.3604. Brazilian real, 3.1884. Egyptian pound, 17.6190. And the South African rand at a 6-month low of 13.7475. Dollar index, I'm bullish about it actually. Euro dollar, last trading at 117.66. I think we're going to visit 114.50. I like this from Andrew Adonis. Brilliant on Brexit. It was heroic in 1940 to stand alone against our enemies. It is ridiculous in 2017 to stand alone against our friends. Sterling, this is a chart from Rafi Kadian, who's saying that 129.50 is a very key level, and it's adios the pound if we drop below there, according to him. Sterling volatility is picking up again, now the highest versus the euro since June. That's Jamie at Reuters. NASDAQ at an all-time high. And you can take a look at equity markets year-to-date performance. It's been a sweet spot for equities. Let's take a look at gold, 1287.09, a bit of a counter-trend rebound that we saw. I think that was from North Korean concerns. Crude oil, $49.92. It's difficult to call right now. It could fall away quite sharply, or alternatively go as high as 55. Emerging markets, Turkey's lira is now the second worst emerging currency this year. That's via J.S. Blokland. And Turkey's lira hit an all-time low versus the euro. That's from Holger. But interestingly, according to Bloomberg's Barclays EM US dollar aggregate index, yields are at a 10-year low in terms of the spread compression over US treasuries at 2.4%. By overall impression and attention to detail, the builders of Hagia Sophia left the world a mystical building. I've been to that building, in point of fact, it's remarkable. And it's got a weeping pillar as well. Inspector Sanjay Kumar rescued this child who was kidnapped. The smile of the child says it all. Love this picture. Pretty great one as well. Sub-Saharan Africa, my aim is to change the DRC, not go after the former president. This is Moishi Gatumbi. He needs to get himself back to the Congo, first of all, before he can do any of that. Mugabe has appointed Chombo to key finance ministry in a cabinet reshuffle, replaced the much-liked finance minister Patrick Chinamasa. Seems an interesting change. Chinamasa was moved to a newly created Ministry of Cybersecurity, Threat Detection and Mitigation. In total, 10 cabinet ministers changed posts, while 2 ministers were dropped. Aliko Dangote's policies in Tanzania are scaring a lot of people. need to look at some of their new laws quickly. This was at the FT Africa Summit. On Tanzania's mineral reforms to increase government equity, he said they are coming through the back door to seize your assets. That's pretty aggressive. And I wrote about this in July 2017. I said recent events in both Tanzania and South Africa's mining sectors are tipping both jurisdictions into an uninvestable and twilight zone. Dangote also said on Tanzania's mineral reforms, it's the wrong policy. Once you chase an investor away, it's very difficult to attract that investor back. January Makamba, who we hosted at Mindspeak, is seen here bantering with President Magufuli yesterday after the cabinet meeting. Maletsi Mbeki says, I find what is happening in Kenya very, very concerning. Dollar Rand, the Rand is at a 6-month low. Take a look at the 6-month chart. Last traded at these levels on April the 11th. Egyptian pound is at 17.6190. Kenya, my piece over the weekend, politics landing blows on the economy, concluded by saying what is clear is that the advantage of incumbency in fact accelerates in this round 2 of the election. The government is better heeled and has deeper pockets, and the opposition has largely run out of money, and therefore hence they're not campaigning, and that's why I say that the advantage accelerates. And I concluded in my piece saying I expect the opposition to boycott the election entirely, and that the strategy of tension will be maintained by degrading and denigrating the entire process. Market participants need to model this scenario because this is the direction of travel, I said. And in the Daily Nation, this is the front page of the Daily Nation, speaking to the point I was making. Raila Odinga has heard in this video that Larry Madowo posted, I choose not to participate in a pre-rigged electoral process. No court can order me to do so, he said. No court can force me to vie in a general election. I will be in the UK for a day and then I will be back, he said. President Kenyatta claims that Raila Odinga wants to withdraw from the October 26 repeat election in order to cause anarchy. So we've got a very fluid situation, and it's technically quite interesting. If you read the Constitution, it appears that if he does not stand in the election, it's essentially invalidated. And that's interesting. Kenya is failing to create enough jobs for its young people. Kenya's rapidly expanding workforce isn't finding jobs fast enough, according to a new World Bank report. Unemployment and underemployment are rampant, especially among the youth. Put simply, job growth isn't keeping up with economic growth in Kenya. If it was, East Africa's largest economy would have created 150,000 more jobs than it did in the 5 years to 2013. Even so, this would have covered only half the gap between the growth in jobs and the working age population over that time. It is a huge challenge. The central bank issued a press release regarding a non-binding offer by the State Bank of Mauritius for Chase Bank. Take a read. East African is opining on why East Africa's retailers are struggling to stay in business, saying optimism started being eroded in April this year when the Nielsen Africa Prospects Report on macro business, consumer and retail indicators showed that reduced spending, rising cost of living and high interest rate regimes are making it difficult for retailers to operate in the region. With predictions for growth lower than those experienced in the previous 10 to 20 years and volatility experienced in 2016 set to continue, businesses will require resilience, relentless adjustments and adaptation to meet consumers' altered needs. Questions abound as why the retailers are sagging under debt, yet foot traffic has been growing. The Kenyan retail sector recorded $3.16 billion in revenues last year. A 2016 survey by Procter & Gamble on Kenya's retail sector indicated a 13% expansion last year. So this is primarily about Nakumatt. ARM says it will get an additional $15 million cash injection from its key shareholders. They're going to spend that money on Tanzania. ARM closed unchanged yesterday at 13. It's down 42.22% so far this year. The shilling is at 103.295. And as I said in my article over the weekend, it's really been a miraculous shilling and speaks to credibility of the central bank and their FX management skills. Once again, thank you for stopping by.